Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back, and thank you so much for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast. Mariano Alvarez here with Brent LaBrada, and we want to let you guys know that you are just the best listeners in the world, and you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, all by searching Dog Trainers Podcast, as well as give shout-outs to the cities that have been showing us love lately. Thank you guys so much. We've been getting a crazy amount of support and questions and all that good stuff. So what's up to Atlanta, Georgia, Sydney, New South Wales, Phoenix, Arizona, and Columbus, Ohio? And if you guys can believe it, this is the end of season 1. We can't believe that we've made it this far. The podcast has just come, it's just done so much more in terms of what we expected in such a short period of time. And we want to talk to you guys about what's to come with season 2. So with that, over to you, man.
Thanks for the handoff, Mariano. This is a huge achievement for us. Just the other week, we got 1,000 followers on Instagram, which was dope, which I know doesn't seem like a lot, but you know, when you start something off kind of as a side project and it ends up being one of the funnest things you do all week. There's a lot to say about just doing what you love, right? And doing it with people that you love, right? You're my brother, man. So thank you so much for being my partner here on this podcast.
I love you right back.
Thanks, man. And let's jump in to kind of the journey, some of the stuff that we learned during the podcast. And, we just kind of want to share with you guys our journey and what we've learned the last, 18 months? Something like that.
About 17 months. Yeah.
17 months doing a podcast. And we're really excited to tell you guys about the future of Dog Trainers Podcast. We got some cool stuff to share with you later in the episode. So please stick around.
Absolutely. So let's start with why we started the podcast. And I think the best way to kick that off would be to let you guys know. I think we've touched on this a bit, but just to make it absolutely clear, Brent and I have known each other for about 6-7 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. I used to live in Los Angeles and we used to work for the same kennel, and that's how we know each other. And the podcast is far from the first, even like the first few pieces of content that he and I have made together. We've done YouTube videos, we've done all kinds of different things. Mm-hmm. And we, when I moved, we always stayed in touch. We've always been good friends. And we always had this urge to like, how do we take this thing to the next level? How do we teach and inspire and mentor people? And at the same time, build our network and push dog training as a pop culture, piece of life to the very next level. And we were talking about like, logistically, what does that look like? It's nice to have these big questions like how, and wouldn't it be dope if we did X, Y, Z? So we thought about, what if we did videos? What if we did 15-minute like instructionals? What if we did kind of 5-minute shorter, more edited down stuff? What if we did both? And then it came to the logistical, well, I'm in Phoenix and Brent's in LA. So is this going to be like SNL kind of skit style, like a newsroom where it like cuts back and forth from this place to this place? Are we going to be planning trips back and forth here and there? And ultimately, based on what the objective was, which is to reach out to newer dog trainers and just build that network and just have genuine conversations with people, we decided on a podcast as a format. It's longer form. It's easier to do. It's something that we could stick to regularly as our businesses just kind of exploded, especially with the, I don't know about you guys, and I hope this is the case, but as we're kind of on the tail end of COVID, it seems like business like more than picked up, which
everybody
is awesome.
And their mom got a dog.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah. And the mom's dog got a little puppy dog too.
Yeah.
So, the podcast was just a really nice kind of happy medium that's easy for us to do. It was the best way for us to really get into detail like we like to do regarding topics and structure of conversations to really make sure that people maximize their benefit from it, as well as give guests the opportunity to really talk and let us know who they are and how they operate so that, new listeners get the most from it. And that's something that we've just been, ever since we started it, we've always had ambitious goals for it. Like I remember when we had those first few conversations, it was last January, because we started in February.
Yeah.
We would talk about like, man, who knows, in 3 years time, we might have like a guest on, or we might even have this person on it, and then it was like 3 months in that we had our first couple guests on, the second of which being Tyler Muto, and so it was a lot of fun just watching this timeline escalate. And that all has to do with the amazing support that you guys have given us. And I want to touch a bit more on what we've learned from this personally and how it's helped us professionally. So I want to hear you touch on that a bit if we can.
Yeah, man. I think personally, this is, building a business is for everyone listening. If you guys are seeing clients or even working for another kennel or trainer, there is a certain level of repetitiousness. So I guess there's not a lot of variety, right? Like dog training, the process of it, if you just watched it, is relatively boring, right? Like if you don't love the process of the sits and the downs and the repetition and the seeing the growth and all that stuff, like from the outside looking in, dog training can be pretty,
And
just
monotonous.
monotonous and repetitious and things like that. And so I remember one of my favorite things to do is to help people and to help animals grow and to help that human and dog connection, right? Which, as I'm sure with most dog trainers, that's the case. But what happens is when you start building a business and you start dealing with everything else other than the dogs, right? You start dealing with the money side or the business management side, the social media side. Like there becomes this disconnect, at least in my opinion, where all the stuff I loved doing, helping and teaching and all that stuff, it started dwindling away. And the cool thing is this podcast has allowed me to, it kind of put a new spark in me, when it came to teaching and learning and all those things, because, when you're building a business, you're so focused on what's in front of you, the employees, what they need, what the dogs need, what the clients need, that sometimes you have these blinders on. And it's so cool to, through this podcast, be connected to the outside world of dog training and to be connected to all of you guys and to be it helps feel like whole, if that makes sense. Like sometimes I just feel like a body doing things,
Hmm.
and this sense of community that we've built on this podcast and the people that we've gotten to meet via the internet, and just like literally internationally we've gotten to meet a lot of people, and nationally, and it's just so cool. And everyone's cool as fuck. Like to know that we're not alone in our hustle, and to know that we're not alone in that feeling of monotony or just this process. And we all have ambitions and goals, and we all want what's best for the dog. So for me, particularly on a personal level, this has kind of given me a lot of catharsis when it comes to helping people again, on this scale, right? And one of my favorite things to do is to help teach people about dog training, which is, again, this podcast has allowed me to be myself, which is great.
Hmm. That's awesome, man. And honestly, I couldn't agree more. I think the way that I think what you're saying to me, it like sums up. It's like whenever I hear you describe things, it kind of, it makes me think about like, well, how would I describe this? And the way that I look at it is I've always felt this way, and I forget where I heard this. I think it was Andy Frisella. It's another podcast, and it was there's nothing more personal in the world than building your own business. I know that everybody draws that line between the two, like, well, this is personal, this is business. But when it's your company, it's directly linked to how much you can grow and adapt as an individual, which means as you grow as a person, the business grows alongside you because you have newer skill sets. And we're not talking the monotonous. We're not talking like, are you good with payroll and HR and this and that and this and that? But especially in the dog training world where it's not like a product, it's not like, well, a phone is a phone no matter who sells it. It's you are the service, you are the face of your business. And the better you get just as a person in general, the better the product gets essentially, right? And more customers want a better product. And so I think what you were trying to say, or at least to me, this is what I took it as, because this is how I feel, is when you're doing the day to day and you've got those blinders on, I look at it like from the old football terms, like you just put your head down and you keep your feet moving. They say keep your feet chopping at all times, right? Having this podcast, having something that allows us to keep our eyes up on the big picture, allowed me to keep my feet chopping the whole time without putting my head down. I can stay focused on the goals in the future, even though the body, the rest of it is just doing the today goal, right? I've got to take care of this and that, make sure this dog gets a bath and that dog gets whatever. But it is really easy, especially when you're busy, at least for me. It's really easy to lose sight of the future like that and just kind of buckle down and focus on what's in front of you. And the podcast has been amazing for helping me stay focused on what's coming like a year or two down the line.
Yeah, and I think between you and I, keeping each other accountable was a huge thing. I
Right.
think I couldn't have done this without you, and I think maybe vice versa, you couldn't have done it without me.
Yes.
So I think an accountability and a self discipline it's exciting to think of like, ooh, who are we going to get on next? And what are we going to talk about next? What do we think people want to hear or listen to? And, at some point about midway through the season, people started like sending us questions and sending us prompts and sending us things. And so it started becoming easier. And then all of a sudden there becomes this desire to serve. You know what I mean? Like we're trying to help people, and we're trying to connect people with their favorite dog trainers, and we're trying to, help people who might be confused and on methodologies and whatever, and just at least learn a little bit of context of what could help or what could work for them. So it's really motivational from a personal perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And what's weird is what's funny, you and I actually haven't had this conversation that I'm about to bring up at all in the whole time that we've been doing this podcast. So you guys, Brent and I are good friends. We talk all the time. And I've seen him once since the pandemic started. And that was like a couple weekends ago. That's where we put those photos up on the Instagram. But I've got to say, even though we haven't seen each other, Brent and I are probably about as close as when we lived right in LA together. We're working together. And I think that the podcast has been, honestly, the podcast has been not only like this crazy cathartic thing for business and for, it's been like really good for our friendship, I think. And it's awesome because we've also been able to see and push each other in a different like creative space. Like Brent's talking about accountability. And I think that the reason why the accountability thing, it's not just that, it's more the confidence thing. Like you guys understand, when you have someone that's just as dialed in, like as tuned into you as like me and Brent, there's this really cool feeling where it's like you're not alone. It's like I would be nervous if I had to interview Tommy Davis, Tyler Muto, Michael Ellis. I'm not nervous if we have to interview, it's something special when you got somebody that like helps pick right up, and it's almost like a team effort type thing. And I think it's been awesome. So on a personal level, yeah, man, I think it's been such a great way for me to like continue to get to know you more.
Yeah, I agree, man. And I think, I don't want to keep talking about us. Maybe we'll move on, but I don't want to make it too corny. But yeah, man, I think we're really lucky. I think we're really lucky. And this is, we've been told by several guests that we do a good job. So I'm going to take their word for it. Right. And those of you guys that are listening, and we've heard it from you guys too. So the chemistry here is awesome. And so we're going to keep doing it, and we're going to keep working. Mariano, what are some things that help that you've learned business wise?
Let me tell you what I've learned business wise. This is something that I found extremely beneficial and informative. Is when we started this podcast, something that I've had to learn, because for you guys to keep things in perspective, it's not like you just start a podcast. There's research that goes into this sort of thing. There's not only research into the rest of the dog training world, but just logistical research into what a podcast should look like to maximize its like popularity. And the research that I have done would suggest to me that there is this middle ground between being patient and allowing things to grow on their own time, but never stopping to progress it forward. Aggressive patience is how it was coined to me. And I'm naturally an impatient person. Like I can be patient if I want to be, but like internally in my head, I'm like, oh, what the hell? Like, let's go, So it's been this total journey, because the podcast, from a business perspective, it's just grown about as fast as my business in Arizona has, which is really fast. And I'm lucky to say that. And another thing that I've noticed business wise is I've really understood on a different level since we started this podcast, the importance of doing things once to maximize your time. An example being, right in the middle of the shutdowns, Brent and I did the episode. It's actually still one of our biggest episodes, a deeper look into structure, right? And then after that was the top 5 tips for structure. And in it, we talked episodes 4 and 5. And in it, we were talking, like crate training and this and that and obedience. And, right around that time, I was getting just straight inundated with calls. Oh, my dog's separation anxiety. It's a COVID dog, got it 2 months ago, can't be without me, yada, yada, yada. And instead of like having the exact same conversation over and over, because people call like 4 times a day, 5 times a day, on top of the dogs you have and everything else, then I would just direct them like, hey, you guys, actually, we just did an episode. Do me a favor, check this out. Let me know what you think. And a 20-minute conversation turned into a 4-minute conversation. And they, sure enough, they call back and they're like, we love it. We're in. What do we do? What's
Love
next?
that.
You know, and I've really taken that to heart of like, man, not only with the podcast, but how else can you streamline things in training so that you're free to do your thing?
Yeah. And this ultimately brings down like content creation, right? Like
Right.
like this is the most consistent thing I've ever done in regards to social media or content or having a platform or whatever, right? So those of you guys who follow us, like we only made it to 1,000. It took us less than a year, but we made it to 1,000 followers. And some of the people that we're interviewing, they have like 50,000, 60,000, 80,000, a million followers, depending on what platform that they're on. And we could have bought followers. We could have done things different, but
I hate those messages.
this is an organic like thing, right? Like we wanted to have people who actually listen, who actually want to participate, who actually want to make this their podcast, and it's working. And the interesting thing is, I come from a film background and a performance background, so like talking and improvising is not something that difficult for me necessarily, right? But what we see is that this growth of the podcast has taught me how, if you stay consistent, not only can you help more people, but your reach is better, right? Like I can help more people by sending them the episode or sending a video, or we can bypass things like having to sell something, right? Like having to sit down. I think it was Sean O'Shea's episode where he was talking about the old style of selling, which was, you have a phone call with somebody and you sit them down and you bring it in for a consultation and then you schmooze them and then you take their money. And I was like, oh, you're describing exactly how I sell pretty much. Right. And just having a platform or having a content or having a video of what it is that you do, like just that was really proven to me of like, hey, if you just create the content and put it out there, not only does it save you time downstream, but you're also able to help people, because not everybody who watches or listens to your content is going to have to pay you for it. Right. But having that free content out there helped so many people. And I want to thank every single person who DMs us or sends us emails, who just literally, some of the emails just go, been listening to your podcast for the last 2 months. You guys are amazing. Thank you for what you're doing. And just those messages are so powerful, like to make us to want to keep doing this.
That's a good point, because Sean, it's essentially the like, if you build it, they will come, right? And I don't think Sean was the originator of that, because I know Jeff was training since before Sean, and of course, like Tyler, I think, and Tommy, they were like some of the first trainers on YouTube, right? So they kind of grew with the platform. And but I've got to hand it to Sean, because for me personally, Sean O'Shea was definitely a big inspiration. Years and years ago, when I was learning e-collar, I was watching Sean O'Shea, and I knew that he was very tightly linked with Jeff, because they did their other stuff. Like they not only had their like their before and afters and the tutorials for the good dog, but they've also had like Q&As, and Jeff was like always there. And I knew that they were a thing. And then T3 at that time was just in the works, but they were talking about it. It's going to be me and Jeff and this and that. But, I think Sean definitely was one of the front runners. I think that's fair to say, of this new form of marketing with dog training. And I think that it is fascinating how it's almost like this funny little play on the commutative property, like 2 + 3 = 3 + 2. But it sometimes it doesn't. Like you can put all this free content out there, and Brent's absolutely right. There are people out there who, for one reason or another, aren't going to be a client, right? They're too far away, or they can't afford it, or or just whatever the case. But if that's the case, they were never going to be your client anyway. However, there are a ton of other people out there who are close enough, or whatever the case, who don't have these barriers to entry, who would have no idea who you were if it wasn't for this content. And it's not something to look at like, well, if you're giving away all your training secrets, then you're not going to have business, because the key to it is, it's like anything else. It's like, we all know logistically how to be in amazing shape. You eat right and you work out. Like we know how to do it. But nobody, like not everybody can do it.
Of course,
right?
I know. Right?
Yeah, with my Adonis like figure. But but almost nobody does it, because the work is everything. That's what Michael Ellis was telling us. That's what Tommy Davis was telling us. Tyler Muto is the practice, the theory, the hands-on, that and all the stuff that comes with it. Because Sean, I remember when we spoke with him, and I had spoken with him before, and it was just training dogs, yes, but like I'm up like at 4 or 5 in the morning writing my blog posts on a piece of paper. That's how they got the books going, is they take all these different ideas down like for the posts, and then over time they just take them all, dwindle them down into like a cohesive message, and then that becomes the books. And that was a form of marketing in dog training that always stuck with me. So from a business perspective, that was really a big motivation for, at least for me, when we started the podcast, was like, dude, that's the point. Let's really tell people about stuff in detail and let them know that we know, and hopefully this helps someone. And naturally, I know personally I've gotten clients out of the podcast. I don't know if you have, but and I've been getting clients. Like, I've noticed that with the podcast, my client pool has gotten a lot bigger. Like, I just got my first eval from a client who's moving here from New York. And I've gotten a couple dogs from down south in Tucson, Arizona, and all over the place, or clients who are like now here, but they're from other places, and they all tell me like, oh, well, we actually found you on the Dog Trainers podcast, or whatever the case. So from a business perspective, yeah, it's definitely opened my eyes to things. Not to mention, this was a tip that I was giving to trainers when we did our episode on marketing, right? Old school marketing was just, how about this? Take some of your business cards and go to different kennels and rescues and like breeders and whatever, and just give out the cards, and just ask them like, hey, would you guys be so kind as to give this card out with this rescue dog, with this puppy, with this whatever. And when I reached out to a local like puppy store here, you guys know how it's so political in the dog training world, pure positive versus this and that. So of course I reach out to them and I'm like, hey guys, how do I get on this list of referred trainers? Like, obviously I would expect you to want to like vet me out and make sure that I'm good. And that's fine. Here's my info, here's my website. And I lucked out because the person who's in charge of all that was, I was like, okay, so here's my information. And also here's the podcast. Like, this will give you a really accurate idea of how I work. And they hit me back immediately like, oh, I love the podcast. I just finished the episode with Michael Ellis. And I was like, awesome. Oh, sweet. So stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, and there's so many other things that we've learned that are just more direct, like to dog training, with the method and formula and all that good stuff. But we want to get into that next. So yeah, man, I mean, let's talk a bit more about some things that we've learned from guests, because I know that there have been so many.
Well, yeah, I think a couple things that I've learned directly from, some of our interviewers that really helped me in my practice, right? One would be Michael Ellis, right? Like, obviously, how can you talk to Michael Ellis and not learn something? I think one of the big things that he brought to my attention was how important, not having short programs is. He said, back when I used to do board and trains, he goes, I do a minimum 6-week program, right? So lengthening my programs for the betterment of the work and the dog, and also my staff, and making sure that the dog isn't getting unnecessary pressure put on him. That's one thing I learned. And also what I think has been the most important, right? Because my old format, I used to train a dog for a month, and that month the owners wouldn't see the dog until the demonstration, right? Which I feel is a very old school format of like, look, I train a dog and ta-da, look how wonderful he is, right? But one big thing that I pulled from that episode of Michael Ellis was talking about just how important it is for them to come and learn the technical skill, right? And obviously I would do follow-ups in my old practice, and I was very successful doing follow-ups post-training. But man, the amount of time that you save doing follow-ups or lessons while the dog is still in session, and the amount of thoroughness that you can have while people are, actually having to come to you to work with their dog and also visit their dog, right? So you kind of have a little bit more leverage. Like before, when I used to do the post follow-up thing, pretty much, you train a dog for a month or so, and then the dog goes home, and you might require them to come and do their lessons, right? But a lot of times people are happy with better, right? If it's 50% better, 80% better, 90% better. And so what tends to happen is when people have a dog who is better and they just paid X amount of money for a dog to be good, it doesn't matter how many times you tell them you have to do work, you have to do work after, you have to do work after, people are happy with way better. Right. And so what tends to happen is they might do one lesson, maybe 2 lessons, but they would never do enough lessons where they actually had to master control over their dog. Right. And what I've learned was in my programs, if I have that person come back every single week, right? What it did is it kind of dampened that fear of like, I don't get to see my dog for a whole month, right? It dampened that. I said, no, you're going to come and see him every week, actually. But also what it did is my owners were able to take their dog home more competent than previous clients, right? So not only do they know how to handle their dog, how to walk their dog on leash, but now they're actually knowing their house rules. And now they're knowing, the psychology of why they need to do that. And all of that is because I was able to leverage the fact that they missed their dog and I made them do lessons now. Right. And so I think that was so important. So I want to say thank you to Michael Ellis for just dropping that little seed, and it just bloomed into, it saved me time, technically saves me money, technically makes a better product. Definitely the dogs are happier, the people are happier, everyone wins. So that was such an amazing idea I pulled from Michael Ellis.
Dude, Michael Ellis was just a gold mine of information. That was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved like when his wife stuck her face in upside down. That was really fun too. But I couldn't agree with you more, especially regarding that point, bringing clients in during the board and train program. And I think it's something that I implemented as well. And it's, you're right, totally, about it being another way to like ease clients out of the fear of like, man, I don't get to see my dog for this long, but something that I've really found very invaluable about it, about like why, if we're talking about in a more direct sense, what we've learned from guests, what I've learned very directly from people is to start thinking about the why, start making things make sense, because this is a podcast. We have to explain these things. And I know what everybody knows. I know everyone knows what I mean when I say there are things like, but you couldn't quite put into words as to why or how, right? Until you try. And what I think it makes sense for me with having guests, sorry, I'm thinking podcast, but with having clients come in while the dogs are board and training is when you have them in once a week, not only do they get a chance to hit the ground running because they've had a few lessons before the dog goes home, but the benefit of doing it weekly is they get to see the dog in the various phases of training. Mm-hmm. So they get to practice and they actually get to learn how training works. So you're turning them into like mini dog trainers, as opposed to just, here's all you need to know to kind of do your thing. See you later when you realize you have like this other problem. Because I have the same problem with clients too. Like they'll do a lesson or two, then you won't hear from them for like 6 months, and I'm like, where you been, man? Like, of course the dog's jumping. Have you been doing XYZ? And they're like, well, no. So it's been nice, because if I can show the client, this is why I do food work. This is why I do leash work. This is why I told you in the beginning e-collar was going to be the way to go, or whatever was going to be the way to go. And all the while, why I did it in this order, then the clients, and they have time to ruminate on it weeks, right? Because it's broken up. So they have like a long period of time to really understand, like, oh, I get it. So this, then this, then that, that's the kind of thing that really helped me push them to the next level. It was all to do with the understanding of the why behind the how.
Right. It kind of allows them to ponder about it a little bit more without the pressure of actually having the dog there. So that was a huge game changer. Something else I learned that there's similar themes in every guest, but I think one that we pulled from Larry Crone, one that I pulled from Sarah Brewski, Tommy Davis, Tyler Mudo, Blake Rodriguez, is Denise Fenzi.
Yes.
Ask questions, keep learning. Like, you have to keep learning, guys. You have to keep learning. And when you have these people that have been doing it 25, 30, 35, 40 years in the game, and they're in good places, like they're in good places, reputation wise, work wise, but they still are hungry for knowledge. And I think that being hungry for knowledge is the point of this podcast, right? Like we want to find a way to bring you guys, whether it's through audio, whether it's through video, whether it's through seminar, whatever it is, like, how can we make dog training cool, right? And how can we make dog training digestible, and how can we make it understandable? Now, not just for you guys, but one of the big things that we're changing in season 2 is how do we make more content for actual dog owners, right? So we will ask you guys a little bit for help. Please tell us what we should make episodes on. And then maybe you guys won't have to explain it. You'll just say, hey, listen to this Dog Trainer podcast episode on crate training, or this Dog Trainer podcast episode on leash reactivity, or whatever it might be,
Right.
But tell us what you guys want us to make podcasts on, because we want to start making stuff for dog owners as well through this platform, which I think will be really helpful.
Yeah. And it's funny that you bring that up, because something that I've learned very directly, this was before having him on, but also, of course, while we had him on, Sean O'Shea, is he's the one who said to me, jot your thoughts down and every now and again go back and revisit whatever the topic and see if you can't describe it in a different way, and then a different way, and then a different way. And he was like, that's how I really boil down how I explain things to people. And for people who watch or follow the Good Dog and Sean and T3 and all that stuff, I personally, I think he just has a vibe to him that's just so watchable, right? It's so like easy to listen to and digest. And he clearly knows what he's talking about when it comes with behaviorism and obedience training and e-collar and all that good stuff. And, you know, it's so easy. Like for me, just as a viewer, we're talking before the podcast, for me as a viewer to be like, man, I wish I just had that like personality or whatever it is. Like it's so easy to just pass the buck as like, oh, well, I could never, because I'm not him. And he's like, no, man, I didn't even start dog training until I was like this old. It's really just because I took the time to write things out. And so it's already on the tip of my tongue because I've gone through this several times, and it keeps my brain in this different like formulaic way of thinking that, you know, I hear something or I say something, and even as I'm going about it, I'm trying to like assess, could I have said that more concise? Could I have said that more, you know, to hit harder, like emotionally or logically or whatever the case. And I think that was a really important lesson that I carry moving forward. And another one was, you know, it's the funniest thing because it's the smallest thing. When we had on Tyler Muda, Tyler was our third guest ever behind Corey Chavez and Shona Smith. And he was our first really big guest. And, you know, we were watching a lot of his content, just kind of prepping ourselves. It was an interview, you know, so we're like, let's watch some of his work. Let's like know what we're doing, because everybody's seen an interview, and regardless of like where, you know, where like the interviewer doesn't know anything about what they're asking. And it's like, why are you there? You know, like, why are you interviewing Dr. Dre? Where's someone else at who knows what they're talking about?
You don't even like hip hop. Yeah,
exactly. You know, and it's almost like disrespectful. It's like, who are you? You know? So we didn't want to be that person. So we're like, okay, let's really make sure we know our stuff. And Brent's been following Tyler for a long time, so he knew, right? So I was kind of playing catch up. And something that Brent showed me actually was, he was like, here, watch Tyler. Here's a link. And the video that he sent me was Tyler Muto working e-collar with the dog to teach place command. And the dog wasn't like super new to the board and train program, and the dog knew place, but the dog hadn't yet learned e-collar. So the e-collar place was new. And it was just Tyler in a room with a bed and a camera guy. And something that I learned, it was so tiny, but it just stuck with me forever. And I swear, I think about this like every day. And I talked to him about it when we had him on, and I've talked about it since with other guests, is Tyler was going through repetition, using like his body to kind of guide the dog on, like as if the dog was in heel, walk alongside the bed so the dog ends up on the bed. You know, he walks away to talk to the camera to explain what's happening, just a couple steps away, not very far. The dog in the background kind of thinks about it and like reluctantly takes his paw off the bed and reaches onto the floor. And this is what amazed me. Tyler didn't say no. He didn't tap that button. He didn't grab and pop the leash. All he did was just walk back into the dog, 2 little steps. The dog takes their paw, puts it back on the bed and goes like this. And Tyler goes, yeah. And while as he's doing it, he's explaining to the camera, like, I'm not going to correct him. I'm not going to do this or that. And the reason why is because this dog, like, clearly, do you see how he did it? He looks confused. You know, corrections are not meant to add stress because the dog doesn't know what's happening. Oh, and now you're getting corrected. Have fun, right? And I was like, wow, that's something that really changed my perspective on like giving dogs passes on that kind of thing, because essentially what his message was in the overall, sometimes you have to let little things go for the overall, like for the bigger picture, for the sense of like making sure that the dog actually enjoyed this exercise, right? This session. And I was like, man, that makes a ton of sense. And it seemed like such a small thing because it was just one repetition. And I was like, wow, but the dog didn't make that mistake again. And he didn't correct it. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating, you know? Right. And that stuck with me. And it really made me not only assess myself and my trainers when they're working with our dogs, but honestly, you know, it's made me dive into, you know, in better detail, like, what are corrections for? When are they really appropriate and why, and everything else? And that's a topic that we're going to dissect in another episode, so I won't get too far into it, but that ball got rolling with that video with Tyler, and it was just 2 seconds of like an 8-minute video, you know, but it's little things like that stick with me.
Yep. No, I agree. And there's a lot of little things, and it's to sit here in a podcast and try and list all of them. Well, this will be like a 10-hour podcast because, some people when they record stuff, they don't listen back or watch their stuff. I've
Right.
listened to every single episode back because when I'm in the interview or I'm just going through the motion, I don't remember what I said. And and I'm just in the moment and I don't remember what I said or what we talked about necessarily. So I'll actually go back and I'll listen and I'll be like, oh shit, that was really dope. Not necessarily what I said, what that interviewer said, right? Or
Right.
what we talked about with that interviewer. And so I always like to be an audience member and I listen to back to the episodes and I relearn shit, right? One thing I wanted to bring up, you know, Corey Chavez, Shona Smith, Tommy Davis, who else? Nahum Russell, Jonas Black, the K9 Performance Team, Samantha Johnson, John Gata, right? These people just scream authenticity,
Mhm.
right? Now, so does everyone else, right? Like the other people that I hadn't mentioned are kind of a little bit, in my dog training book are on a little bit of a pedestal, right? They're OGs, they've been doing it for years and, look up to them, right? And the people I listed are closer to my peers, right? I would say. And the authenticity that these people have about they know who they are, they represent who they are, they do their thing, they are, they do what they do, right? And I think that was a big through line across all these people is how important it is to be authentic and how important it is to do what you love and how important it is to follow your passion and follow your dreams. And this is the cool thing that ties every single episode together. And this is what ties us to you guys, our followers, and the people who listen to the podcast, is our passion to make the world for dogs a better place, right?
Mhm.
And it's really interesting to just experience that, and it's a really beautiful feeling to feel like, hey, man, we're in this community together, and we just got started, So that's all I can really think of as far as what I learned, or that's all I really want to talk about as of now. But yeah, thank you guys for being part of the community. It's really a special thing.
Yeah, you guys are so awesome. And I've got to say, I still think like one of my favorite episodes is episode 49, Denise Fenzi and Sarah Bruschi. I think there's just so much to commend them for because number one, if you guys check out those episodes, Sarah was on with us for episode 43, and then she was back on with us with Denise Fenzi on episode 49. And if you guys listen back on those, both of their both of their catalogs, both of their just list of achievements is insane. What they're doing now, what they've done in the past, and it's something that I think should be talked about more, which Sarah brought up, was why is it so rare for trainers of different methodologies to just get together and talk?
Mhm.
I'll tell you guys what, as happy as we are so far with the list of guests that we've had on, not only do we have no intention of slowing that down, we want to have people back, we want to have new people on, but I've got to tell you guys, we've reached out to so many people that weren't on. And it is kind of tough to have like an R plus trainer on the podcast.
Mhm.
I don't know
Mhm.
if it's because of all the animosity out there online and stuff like that. Maybe they thought they were like walking into an ambush. And frankly, it's hard to blame them because of all the nonsense you see online. But Sarah and Denise, they gave it a shot. They trusted us. They were like, you know what? All right, we'll see what happens. And
Mhm.
Sarah, because we had her on first, she was so like game. It was cool. She was like, whatever, guys, whatever you want to talk about, I'm good.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because we
Mhm.
wanted to really make sure she felt comfortable. We're like, hey, can we talk about this, this, and this? And she was like, yeah, whatever, I'm good. I'm down.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we were
Mhm.
like, okay, and we dive right in. But in particular, having Denise on, it's just, you know, man, she's one of those people that you just can't help but like. You ever heard somebody talk for like 5 minutes and you're like, oh, this person is like the real deal.
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
they know their stuff. And something in particular about that episode or those episodes is not only were they willing to have the conversation, they were willing to just talk with us frankly about like, well, R plus sometimes has this problem, that problem. And so we wanted to reciprocate. Well, it's not like the balanced world is perfect either. And it was just so nice and such a refreshing change of pace. And I would like to think informative for our listeners to have people from different points of view in the training world who can all just sit down and just talk and laugh it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we agree on a lot more stuff than we disagree on,
Absolutely.
and I think those conversations definitely need to be had more.
But it's crazy because that explains literally everything. Everybody agrees on more than they disagree. Like,
of course,
in any realm of anything, like professional or not. And that's why I just found it so fascinating. Like, it sounds so easy and so simplistic to say that right now, but nobody does it, and they did it, so I have to give them that credit.
Yeah. A lot of huge shout out to Denise Fenzi, Sarah Brewski. We hope to have more R+ trainers on, because it's beautiful. Sarah Brewski said something in one of the episodes, and then we'll move on. Something that I used to say all the time, like, this is a spectrum. It's not this versus that. It's a spectrum of colors. Right. And that's one of the big things is, I've always believed and looked at, even when I used to run a dog training school, like, I would teach it as different colors. It doesn't matter the format, the style, whether you're using clickers, not clickers, corrections, motivators, toys, doesn't matter what you're using. They're all just different colors and different hues on a color wheel. And the interesting thing is the whole color wheel is dog training.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so that was a really cool to see another person in a different state who has different life experiences than I do understand and be on that same level and that same wavelength. So,
well, especially when these people have been able to create as much as they had, I look at it very similar. So instead of like a color spectrum, I look at it more like an actual painting. And it's just, my on a business and personal level, my training just as a trainer has completely evolved and transformed when I started looking at things less in terms of like a packaged method. Like, okay, well, within the realm of food work, you can do this, and within the realm of leash work, you do this. Instead, I started looking at things like this. If you're making a painting, if you're painting a picture, you don't stick with one paintbrush. There are different tools for different pieces of the job, and it's all one job. It's one painting. But if you try to do the whole thing with one paintbrush, you probably could, especially if you're talented. But you limit yourself. And for what? The only thing that ends up suffering is the painting, right? So I stopped looking at things like, well, leash work has this positive and negative, and food work has this positive and negative. And I started looking at it as, okay, so here's the job. I need to get the dog to sit. And I can do it with this, or this. I can use this brush, that brush, this, and all of which could get it done. Okay, but which would get it done the quickest? Or this was another thing that really helped me transform the way I looked at things was, it really makes no difference to me, which, for me, it's all easy. But what if I personally think, based on this list of circumstances, I think the client's going to do it best with this paintbrush. And that's how I started formulating everything. And I think that when I started thinking of things that way, it totally transformed the way that I looked at training overall. And it totally transformed the byproduct. The dogs were just so much sharper. The client's so much happier.
I agree. And I think my struggle was, I have a team of 5 people. It was getting everyone on the same page with that, right? And being able to break things down enough to be able to do that. So, this is crazy. Season 1, a couple seasons from now, we're going to look back at season 1 and be like, that was cool.
Right. No, a couple seasons from now, we're going to look back like, oh, that was pretty good. But it wasn't as good as season 3.
It was exactly. So let's talk to the people a little bit, Mariano. What are some things that we got what's coming? What's coming in season 2? What are we working? We've spent many hours discussing this, and let's give it to them.
I'm so pumped for this. So here's what's to come, you guys. Season 2 of the podcast is going to be just everything turned up to 11. So much bigger. We are going to have more guests. We're going to have return guests. We are going to have just more detailed conversations. We're going to have roundtables with trainers, Q&As on Instagram, all kinds of different things that I want, to dive into in better detail. But essentially, it's just this season 1 has just been this wild ride of us kind of finding our footing. And I still go back and listen to like the very first 2 episodes, and I'm like, God, that sucks. So like,
you can say that, but some people like them, man.
No, I like them. I mean, but again, you have to start somewhere. I'm the one who always said, like, start somewhere. But I can say that because it's better. It's all good, and I say that not to like tear us down, but I say that hopefully, like, man, when we're at an episode 150, we're gonna be like, this is freaking gold compared to episode 51.
Right.
So,
Well, that's the nature of growth, though, you know.
But I'm happy for that. Like I'm not looking at it as a bad thing, you know. I love that the trajectory is up, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But yes, season 2 is going to be massive. We've got trips coming up and all this stuff. So let's dive into it in better detail.
Yeah.
Roundtables with trainers.
Yeah. So roundtables, guys. So obviously, this isn't our idea. We see it all over the world, right? I'm on YouTube and I watch a roundtable with comedians on the Hollywood Reporter, right? And I'm not the only person who's had this idea, but we're going to try, or not, we're going to try, we are going to create roundtables with some of your guys' favorite dog trainers to have people sit, not necessarily in person, but at least on a Zoom call to discuss issues, to discuss questions. And where are those questions going to come from? They're going to come from you guys, right? Or they're going to come from you young dog trainers who have questions for certain professionals. We don't know who they could be, but they're going to be people who either have a successful business or who are very influential dog trainers. And so we want to kind of get the knowledge, the wisdom, the refined interpretation of something from these special guests to be able to help us understand concepts that might be difficult for newer dog trainers to understand, you know, dealing with a client or how aggression works or, you know, anxiety or behavior modification or something like that. And so that way, one thing that I've loved about hearing elder dog trainers talk, or just more experienced dog trainers, people who've really put in the hours of explaining and teaching, is finding those words to explain the thing that you feel is correct, but you have no clue how to actually put them into words to help explain to a client or a person or anything like that, right? And so that's what the roundtables are gonna help us with, and that's huge. So we're super excited to give you guys that.
100%, and a big piece of what we've been starting. And you know, sometimes it's like you do something knowing about this benefit, but then there's some added benefit that you didn't even account for. So something that we've really been lucky enough to kind of stumble across is just the network of trainers. It's not like we interview these people and they're gone. We stay in touch. They're friends. Everybody's so nice and so open. And we're looking forward to really finding other ways to build that network and make it even stronger so that we can absolutely maximize the information that we bring to you guys. They're right on board, by the way. Like every one of these trainers, there's a reason why you guys know them, because all of them are just as passionate about putting info out there to help other people. And so we're just trying to, you know, we're just trying to figure out how, like we've kind of come across this big like ball of energy, and we're getting better at directing it. And that's something that really excites me about season 2. Something else though is, you know, we were tossing this idea back and forth somewhat recently, but you know, we're going to have some merch made up, shirts and hats and this and that. You know, we're throwing stuff out there for ideas, maybe stickers, maybe treat pouches, you know, all kinds of different stuff, right? Maybe like life-size body pillows of Brent so that you can hug, you know,
Shut up.
yeah. But you know, there's just this kind of newfound energy and this newfound sense of direction now that we're closing out one season, and it gives you like graduation goggles in a sense, you know. But man, we're so excited about merchandise and Q&As and building that network and having all these people. And something that you know I want to discuss too is Brent and I are heading out to New York in a couple months here to have the opportunity to meet in person finally and do some different content on video with some of the big trainers that we've had on, you know, in the past. We're super excited about this. We're still kind of hammering down the details, and we'll let you know as we go. But we've got some huge plans for the podcast moving forward, including something that we want to tease here in a little bit. But you guys definitely stay tuned.
Yeah, I think these in-person interviews are going to be huge. You know, every single person we've interviewed on the podcast has just been the nicest person. And them agreeing for us to come out and interview them and see them and all that stuff is just the icing on the cake. You know what I mean? It's makes it that much better. And so we're really excited to actually have more in-person interviews with these people and maybe train some dogs with them and maybe document that. Who knows? And also, these new guests, like there's a lot of new guests, guys. It's exciting when other dog trainers reach out to us because they like our podcast so much they want to be on, right? And there's been a couple people have reached out to us. You'll see their episodes coming out in the next couple of episodes. But when other dog trainers go like, you guys are doing a great job, like we want to be on that podcast, and we research them and we go, shit, we were going to have you on anyways. Just geez, that's so amazing. So thank you guys for reaching out to us. And again, everyone is such an amazing person and they're so genuine. That we're super excited about that. I think one big goal that we're working on, and this is the hard part. Like the podcast is easy, right? Because we figured out this workflow. But one of the big things that we still haven't figured out the workflow. I don't know if it's because we're old or we're just out of practice.
Because we're old.
I don't know. But it's the social media thing, man. Like our goal for season 2 is we want to have a better social media presence, right? So how are we going to do that? We're going to do more Instagram lives with you guys, do some more Q&As where we want to do some short interviews and just back and forth with some trainers on Instagram live or TikTok or, Facebook or whatever platform they use. Because, there's a lot of cool conversations to be had and, it needs to be done, like social media is a thing. And those platforms are definitely things we haven't utilized.
Absolutely. And we promise you guys, we are working on it. I feel so old with social media, even though we are the social media generation, or maybe we're the one just before it. Because when we were growing up, smartphones were like a brick that was pretty much useless other than navigation and text messaging.
Yeah, true.
Remember the Google G1? That thing was legit. Or when I'm so old. Nexus I'm so old that I remember when the Sidekick, it wasn't an Android phone, it was just the T-Mobile Sidekick, but they made one later. It was like the Sidekick 3 that was an actual Android smartphone, and I was like, what? And that was like such a new concept. But I remember the Google G1, I think that was like the first Android phone.
No shit.
And it was the coolest thing, and the Google software was so ugly back in the day. Anyway, so my point with this is, yes, we want to make sure that we absolutely make better use and frankly appreciate more the outlet that social media gives us. We came to this really cool realization, guys, that these people who have like amazing draws and audience bases and things like that on Instagram and YouTube, Tommy and sorry, I'm forgetting the name, John Gotta, sorry, like these guys that just command such like a presence online. It's almost this nervous feeling of like, whoa, when you have them on. And it was a cool moment for us when we realized like the podcast as a podcast does super well. Like the Instagram is at 1,000 followers, but the podcast on the various platforms between like Apple and SoundCloud and all that good stuff. And we were like, you know what? We're getting there. We have a decent following and it's all over the world because you guys are just awesome. But it really motivates us to be like, okay, well, why don't we have this level of commitment as in us to you guys on the Instagram and the TikTok and Facebook and YouTube and
the Instagram on the TikTok.
I take my kids to the schoolhouse, the television set. But yes, so we just assure you guys for season 2, that's absolutely in the works. We're going to make sure to take the social media game to the next level.
I'm excited. We have these trips, as Mariano talked about, to New York, and we hope to interview 5 dog trainers, all of which have been guests on this podcast.
Yes.
If you guys follow them, you know where they live, so we'll tell them straight out.
That sounds so creepy.
you know that they're in New York, so these are what we're hoping. Okay, we are literally. I just got off the phone with some of them today. Number 1, Mr. Tyler Muto. We are literally going to his house and interviewing Tyler Muto for the first time in person.
Well, Tyler Muto said he's stealing us over to Canada to go to Niagara Falls on the Canadian side.
Yep. He invited us to go see Niagara Falls. So for those of you guys who don't know, me and Mariano have never been to New York ever. Like
Yeah,
we've
never.
we've never left California or Mexico or Arizona. Like the whole, like, maybe where else have you been?
Well, I was stationed in Texas, so like I've been a few
Oh,
different places, but I've
right.
never been to New York.
Yeah, never been to New York and freaking love it. Like I'm super excited to go to New York.
Me too.
And I know, so we're gonna go see Tyler Muto. Who else are we gonna go see?
Dude, we've got Tommy Davis, we've got Nahum Russell, we've got hopefully Blake Rodriguez. And it's just it's gonna be a fun time, man.
Yep. And we also just recently became friends with Justin Silver. Justin Silver. Those of you guys who know, he had a one season show on CBS. It was called Dogs in the City. And this guy is a cool motherfucker. He's a comedian and he's a professional dog trainer. And funny enough, I remember seeing his stand up years ago in Hollywood when I was watching a friend do a show. And I remember when we reached out, I didn't necessarily put two and two together, but I was like, you're that comedian guy. Like, you're hilarious. And I had no clue he was a dog trainer, but he's proven to be one of the funniest, not the funniest, one of the coolest guys to us so far. So we're looking forward to our interview with Justin Silver as well. Yeah. And so many more, guys. Like, season 2 is going to be so fun. And I'm just excited. Like, I'm ready.
Dude, absolutely. And honestly, guys, I know we say this often, but maybe not often enough. You guys are just the best listeners in the world. And we thank you guys so much for all your support, for all your input, for all your feedback. And please continue that. Do start sending us questions, because like we talked about, we are going to start these Q&As as well as these roundtables. So send in those questions, as well as if you guys have ideas for who you'd like to have on, if you'd like to be on, talk to us, man. Like, this is your podcast and we want to make sure that you guys stay not only as communicative and invested, but even more so. That's part of making this thing bigger and better as we go. And I'll tell you, like, a lofty goal that I have personally, it may not happen season 2, but hopefully one day, because like, of all the weird politics of dog training, I don't see this person like wanting to be on just because we're not pure positive trainers ourselves, but you never know. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I think Tommy Davis is the biggest balance trainer online. If I'm not mistaken, the biggest dog trainer on YouTube, period, is Zach George.
Zach motherfucking George.
I would love to have Zach George on.
I would love to have Zach George on. That would be so dope.
That'd be sick. There's all these, there's like Zach George, there's Caesar, there's everybody's been telling me. So I apologize, guys, I don't know, but everybody's been telling me, Brent, have you seen, there's on Netflix apparently like a dog trainer TV show now?
Canine Intervention?
Oh, I haven't seen it, and everybody tells me that, and I'm always like, oh yeah, I have to watch it, but I have the memory span sometimes of like a goldfish, unless it's something useless that I remember that forever. Yeah. But there's all these different people that we have yet to reach out to, and that's part of making this whole thing bigger and better. So thank you guys so much, because honestly, we couldn't do it without you.
Yeah, I love it, guys. Thank you guys again. That's the end of our episode. This is episode 51. This is the end of season 1. It's been such a beautiful season with you guys, and I want to thank you guys. If any of these episodes have helped you guys in any way, share it with a friend, share it with your mom, share it with your dad, share it with your client, share it with somebody. And also, guys, don't forget to add us on our personal Instagram. So it's at Canis Behavior for me, CANIS Behavior, and also Untamed Dog Co, Untamed DOGCO for Mariano. Go ahead and follow us, and also follow us on our normal Instagram, which is at Dog Trainers Podcast. And thank you guys so much. Don't forget to leave us a review. If you guys leave us reviews, we actually show up more organically on podcast searches. So when people type in dog training on podcast, guess what? We get to show up at the top. So we really appreciate you guys. This is episode 51, what we've learned in season 1. My name is Brent LaBrada, and that guy is Mariano Alvarez. And we really appreciate you guys and love you. And we will see you guys in the beginning of season 2, episode 1. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
We really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we hope to see you back for the next one. But in the meantime, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Dog Trainers Podcast. Go ahead and leave a comment. Ask us any questions that you want. We would love to connect with our dog trainer communities all around the world. Take care, guys. We'll see you next time.